It is time for your final training camp report presented by Advent Health. As this one, you can tell, is a little different. We are no longer out at training camp,
Which
but
we appreciate.
yes, we do. It is sort of the culmination of it, though, because we are finding out about our final 53-man roster, which we love to give the caveat: it's never final.
Yes.
Forever evolving and changing. But in terms of the actual cut downs happening Tuesday afternoon, this was the 53-man roster that came out of training camp and the preseason. So before we dive in kind of position by position, are there any sort of notable things you noticed about cuts or the roster overall?
Well, I don't think there were any surprise cuts. Nothing came along that made you say, wow, I didn't see that coming. But there were some notable ones. I think, obviously, Kyle Trask, after 4 seasons here, I think Coach Bowles let the door open to the potential of considering him if he wants to come back to the practice squad. But I think the more likely outcome is he gets his next opportunity elsewhere. And Teddy Bridgewater is your new backup. And then Trey Palmer, who has obviously proven over the last 2 years that he's an NFL caliber receiver and return man. So he's certain to land somewhere, I would think. But he just got squeezed out by the numbers. We've been talking about how good that and how deep that wide receiving core was, and it proved to be true. And that's especially true because Chris Godwin is not quite ready to play to start the season, but he's also not going on PUP, so he takes a roster spot.
Interesting. And so, a lot of different rosters end up having a bit of a vibe or feel to them. Is there anything as you look at this whole roster overall that kind of stands out to you?
Well, I think one thing that I noticed with who made this team is we heard early in the offseason that special teams were really going to make a difference this year, maybe more than in years past, because you're not going to be kicking every kickoff in the end zone because you want to give up the 35-yard touchback. And I think I can count a good 6 or 7 guys who made it not just because of special teams, but probably that was the deciding factor, such as we kept a 4th running back in Josh Williams. He's good on return. We kept John Bullock, the linebacker, who had 3 special team tackles in the last game. I would say Ryan Miller, Keeft, Marquise Watts, Josh Hayes, and Rashad Wisdom are all guys that probably made it over the hump because of their special teams play. And then you always look for that, at least one, it seems like every year, undrafted rookie who made the team. This year we have 3 of them.
It's amazing.
John Bullock, who I already mentioned, Benjamin Chukwuma, the tackle, and Josh Williams, the running back, who I already mentioned. And I have to give credit for Greg Allman for pointing this out, but not only are these guys all undrafted rookies, but they were all walk-ons at their schools.
Wow. What a cool story for all of them. That's really great news.
And Josh Williams' father actually got his NFL start right here.
Look at that.
In like 97. He didn't actually make our roster, but he did end up playing with the Raiders.
That's very cool. I love that. Okay, well, let's dive in a little bit by a position group here to just give everybody an idea of exactly who is on the roster. We talked about a few of the notable cuts, notable additions. Of course, starting with quarterbacks, on your final 53, this means Baker Mayfield, Teddy Bridgewater. Those are your guys, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, they ran with 2 rather than 3, just like we did last year. And the point there is to go a little heavier at another spot. Like we kept 4 tight ends, and we kept 4 running backs, and we kept 7 receivers. So that has to come from somewhere. I do think if Trask doesn't come back, that there's a good chance that Connor Bazelak will end up on our practice squad. You definitely need a 3rd guy. If you don't have him on the active roster, you got to have one on the practice squad.
Absolutely. Okay, so now running backs, as you mentioned, keeping 4. So Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker, Rashad White, and Josh Williams. Anything stand out to you?
No,
there?
I mean, that's the same 3 from last year, which was a good room. And then Josh Williams just has been really impressive. So that's kind of running it back for the most part. It'll be interesting to see if all 4 have helmets on game days, because usually you only keep 3 active, and keeping 4 up is, makes it, again, you have to take it from some other position.
Right. And then, as you mentioned, taking from other positions, man, wide receivers, you had to keep 7, which is a lot. And it's largely due, of course, to Chris Godwin, not being available right away, I'm sure. And just the fact that you knew that this was a group you were going to want to keep a lot of people of for some of that. And then now, of course, Jalen McMillan as well, that you were just going to need some depth here.
Yeah, think about how tough this decision would have been if Jalen McMillan were healthy. But kept 7, including both Johnsons, Tez Johnson, who I'm personally becoming a really big fan of.
Yeah, same.
I know you like him because he's a great guy, but I'm like
also on the field. Yeah, both things are handy.
I think Ryan Miller did a lot for himself, and we saw what he could do last year when we needed guys to fill in. Sterling Shepard looked good in that second preseason game, so it's 7 is a lot, but it's really feels more like 6. And remember, you made the caveat at the top here that we shouldn't really use the phrase final roster. And that's particularly true in the next 24 hours or so, as we'll talk about at some other positions.
Yeah, now I will say then the one tight ends that was probably our least interesting throughout the camp to talk about, because it was essentially like we hit copy paste
It was the
from
exact
last year.
same guys.
Exact same guys last year, and so we just know tight ends. They were happy with that room, which is great. You got some diversity there in skill set. Kate Otten leading the way, and you got Devin Culp and Payne Durham adding some addition there, and then Ko Kieft as your blocking guy. And they just said, "Yep, we liked that. Let's do it again."
Yeah, the only guy we waived was Tanner Tala, who's been on the practice squad for the last 2 years. I could see him going back to that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, same guys.
And so similar to our conversation about wide receivers, we have our offensive linemen where you knew you were going to maybe be without Tristan for a little bit. And so what did that do to the depth you needed and the types of people you kept on the roster? So we kept 8, and that's kind of typical to an extent. Well, a little bit more than usual. A little less than usual. Okay, so tell me what you noticed about that room and who they kept and why.
Well, 8 is a surprising. I would say this is the most surprising thing to me of the first 53-man roster that results from the cuts, that there's only 8. I really think there's going to be some movement there in the next 24 or 48 hours, because that's 8 guys, but Tristan Wirfs probably isn't ready for week 1.
Yep.
So you only have 7, and you really need 8 guys for game day, because you want your 5 starters, and you have 3 active offensive linemen. If you don't keep the 3rd active offensive lineman, you just get 1 less active player.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to go into any game with 7. You should always go into 8. And right now we only have 7 healthy ones right here.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that within the next 24 hours, maybe Michael Jordan comes back, Sua Peta, somebody like that, or we find somebody on the waiver wire. I mean, think about the fact that about 900 some guys are getting cut today.
Yeah.
So there's
whole new pool of people
going
to
to be
choose
a
from.
pool.
It's going to be interesting. All right, and then defensive linemen, what did you notice here? I know we talked about the fact that the undrafted guys that have made the roster, but man, the draft picks as well are making their mark.
Yeah, Elijah Roberts, I thought he had a really nice preseason. I saw some clips the other day after our last preseason game, and he really is a very good pass rusher from the interior. I know they want him to work on his run stopping, and he did lead FBS the last couple of years in quarterback pressure, so this is no surprise, but it really showed up on tape. And then, we're only going with 5 right there. Usually you carry 6 of those at least. I think there will at least be probably 2 of them on our practice squad, and you got a lot of guys to choose from that were just released, like Adam Gotsis and Mike Green, and there's about 4 defensive linemen that we cut on this list here that any one of them could be coming back.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And then outside linebackers, I thought this one was interesting because we kind of knew the top 4, pretty clearly. But then the fact that you kept 5, and the last one, Marquise Watts, we know Jose Ramirez, they had kind of been battling for that last spot. And it looks like you mentioned that Marquise is one of those guys that maybe it was the special teams that did it for him.
I think it definitely was, yeah. I mean, the top 4 were pretty much set in stone.
Yep.
And so, to be honest with you, you had to create a reason for them to want to keep a 5th. They like to keep 5, but they generally only use 4 of them in a rotation during the game. So the 5th guy, at least for a week or 2, could be superfluous. But Marquise Watts looked really good on special teams. And again, they're keeping guys just for that this year. So I think that's why, A, he beat out Jose, and B, he made them keep 5.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. And then the inside linebackers,
Only 4.
Yeah, only 4. And I think we kind of knew Levante, Servassier, your top guys. We knew probably Deion Jones with his experience coming in. But it was interesting to watch some of these undrafted guys and rookies really make a case for themselves and battle it out during the preseason.
Yeah, I think some of us were a little surprised that it was John Bullock and not Nick Jackson, or not both of them. We only kept 4 there. So, again, that's where you had to go light in order to keep, we'll talk about it in a minute, we kept 11 defensive backs.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, our offense-defense split is 25-25 with 3 specialists, so right down the middle. Just keeping 4 there, I've got to believe that I think Nick Jackson would obviously be a prime candidate to come back on the practice squad. And one of the reasons I keep mentioning bringing some of these guys back on the practice squad, or I'll say 2 reasons. One, not long ago, Coach or Jason Light told us that most of the guys on the practice squad are going to be internal. I think it was Jason Light on our podcast.
Yeah, they love to already know that they're ready, they're informed on the system, they know what's going on. So if they get called up last minute, they're not worried about trying to educate them on what they already need to know.
And then with 16 spots, you can really kind of cover most of the depth charts with a little bit of depth everywhere, right? And so the other thing is, as of the last few years, everybody knows by now, you can elevate a couple of those guys for every game. So I think they will probably go into the first part of the season, especially with Chris and Tristan down, and us a little shy on some numbers at like defensive linemen, with the express plan of, hey, we have to let you go right now, but we want to call you back on the practice squad, and we are going to elevate you for the games. So it's just it's adding to your active roster, to be honest with you. And there's a distinction. You're on the practice squad, but if you get elevated 2 or 3 times and then get re-signed back to the active roster, you've basically been made whole in terms of your salary.
Yeah, and next up, cornerback. This one was going to be fascinating to see, just because, especially of how many injuries happened at this position during training camp in the preseason, where it was a lot harder to gauge where guys stood. Because I remember in Pittsburgh, we're standing there and we're like, I mean, dang near all of our DBs
like 11 guys
we're on the sideline. And so they ended up keeping 6. What stands out to you about who made this group and why?
Obviously, the 2 rookies, the second and third rounders, you expected them to make the roster. Jacob Parrish is probably leading the way to be our starting nickelback. Benjamin Morrison has really been sidelined by a leg injury for the last couple of weeks, but head coach Todd Bowles said today that he thinks Morrison is already running, and there's a chance he'll start practicing again next week, so that's helpful. But I think because you have Benjamin Morrison a little dinged up, you go a little heavy with 6 of them there. Kendall Vildor, like Josh Hayes, is also very good on special teams. So, I think it was just a matter of too much talent. They didn't want to let it go.
Yeah, I was at an event with Coach Bowles last night, and he actually was talking about Jacob Parrish and said he's one of the most polished rookies he can remember being around.
It's incredible.
That he feels like he's playing like he's been in the league for 5 or 6 years already. And for Coach to say that, he's been around a lot of talented and mature rookies, and I think that's a very exciting thing to hear. And then safeties, I know this one was sort of tied in with the corners of who was going to be playing at what and where, especially with guys like Tyke Smith, like Christian Izzian, who we've seen take action at both. So what did this tell you now about where the corners are and where the safeties are, of who they wanted at this spot?
I was a little bit surprised by us keeping 5 of them because we kept 6 corners, and I thought they might try to go 10 total defensive backs, especially because, as you mentioned, a couple of those guys like Tyke and Christian have that slot capability. So really it's kind of blurring the lines between the corner and the safety position a little bit. And then Rashad Wisdom, we saw in that last game, played a lot in the slot. So I think that's another guy they're getting ready to be an option there if you have a couple guys go down or something.
Right. And then we will finish with probably the least surprise, the easiest one to go through, that your 3 specialists, you got Evan Deckers as your long snapper, Riley Dixon as your punter, Chase McLaughlin as your kicker, which, as the way the preseason went on, we knew was exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah,
they were the ones doing it.
And Evan and Chase obviously are returning players. I took a little heat on Twitter the other day for saying something about how Chase virtually never misses. I did knock on wood. But I feel so. I'm not going to really talk about Chase right now. Just, I'm glad he's back.
You've already gotten in trouble once.
I'm glad he's back.
Yes.
Riley Dixon is the new addition, and after last year, the cycling through punters and really not getting good results from that position, we saw in the preseason, this guy's got a big leg and he's very consistent.
All right, well, that does it for us wrapping up our 53-man roster as these first cutdowns happen. But, of course, like we said, practice squad additions, changes to this roster are probably going to happen over the next few days. So make sure you stay tuned to Buccaneers.com for all of that news and those updates.